Memorizing word lists is quietly sabotaging you. What if I told you that the app on your phone, the one you've opened every single day for the past year, has taught you almost nothing you actually remember? It sounds harsh, but it's true. Your brain does not store isolated words the same way it stores meaning. When you memorize abundant next to its translation on a flashcard, you're building a fragile, one-directional link. It works for about 6 seconds in a quiz. Then it's gone. That's why so many people can recognize 3,000 words, but freeze completely the moment a real person asks them a real question. Recognition is not the same skill as recall under pressure, and recall under pressure is the only kind of vocabulary that matters in a conversation. Real conversations force your brain to retrieve a word instantly, attach it to intonation, attach it to a facial expression, attach it to an emotional stake, because someone is actually waiting for your answer. That pressure is exactly what rewires the word into long-term memory. Word lists remove every one of those signals. They give you silence, a blank page, and infinite time, none of which exist when you're actually speaking. So if you've been collecting apps, lists, and flashcard decks for years and still freeze in conversation, understand this. It was never a discipline problem. It was a method problem. The method itself was built to make you feel productive, not to make you fluent. Context is the only glue that makes a word stick. Here's something that should genuinely disturb you. A word you learn without context has roughly the memory lifespan of a phone number you heard once. Your brain is a context-hungry machine. It doesn't file away devastating as an abstract dictionary entry. It files it away attached to the exact sentence, tone of voice, and situation where you heard it used. That's why you still remember song lyrics from a decade ago, but can't recall the vocabulary list you studied last Tuesday. The song had melody, emotion, repetition, and context. The list had none of that. This is exactly why real conversations are so powerful for vocabulary. Every single word arrives pre-packaged with context you didn't have to invent. You hear, "I completely spaced on the meeting," and instantly you understand not just the definition, but the tone, the situation, the slight embarrassment behind it. That entire emotional and situational package gets stored together as one memory unit. Later, when you're in a similar situation, your brain doesn't search a dictionary. It searches memories and it finds that exact moment. This is also why watching a scripted textbook dialogue barely helps compared to listening to two real people talk. Scripted dialogue is context light. Real speech is context rich, messy, and unforgettable, specifically because it's messy. If you want words to stay, stop collecting them naked. Only collect them dressed in a real situation. You don't truly know a word until you've said it out loud under pressure. What if recognizing a word and owning a word are two completely different skills, and you've only ever trained one of them? Passive vocabulary, the words you understand while reading or listening, can pile up into the tens of thousands. Active vocabulary, the words that come out of your mouth instantly when you need them, often stalls at a few hundred. That massive gap is not a coincidence. It's the direct result of only ever practicing input, reading, listening, highlighting, and almost never practicing output under real conditions. Speaking a word silently in your head is not the same as producing it out loud while another human is looking at you, waiting, judging nothing but still present. That social pressure activates a completely different part of language processing, the same system responsible for real-time fluency. This is why some people can write a beautiful, grammatically perfect paragraph but completely collapse mid-sentence in an actual conversation. Their output muscle was never trained, only their recognition muscle. Real conversations are brutal, honest gyms for this exact weakness. Every time you're forced to reach for a word mid-sentence, fail, adjust, and try again, you're doing something no app can replicate. You're building the retrieval pathway itself, not just the storage. Comfort never built this skill for anyone. Discomfort repeated on purpose is what turns a passive word into an active one you'll never lose again. Emotion is the strongest memory adhesive you're not using. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The words you'll never forget are not the ones you studied the hardest. They're the ones attached to a moment you felt something. Neuroscience is blunt about this. The amygdala, the brain's emotional center, works directly with memory formation. A flat, emotionless flashcard session barely registers as worth remembering. But the word you heard the moment you got embarrassed, laughed uncontrollably, or felt a wave of relief, that word is now welded into your memory almost permanently, often after hearing it just once. This is precisely why real conversations outperform textbooks by a staggering margin. Real conversations are emotional by nature. Someone teases you, surprises you, disagrees with you, makes you laugh, and the vocabulary riding along with that moment gets free, permanent storage. Compare that to sitting alone, silently repeating a word 40 times with zero emotional stakes attached. 40 repetitions of nothing versus one moment of something, and the something wins every time. This is also why embarrassing mistakes in conversation, the ones that make you cringe later, are secretly gifts. That sting of embarrassment is the same chemical process cementing the correct word into place for good. If your vocabulary study currently feels calm, comfortable, and emotionally flat, that calm is exactly why none of it is sticking. Real conversations are uncomfortable on purpose, and that discomfort is the entire mechanism that makes them work. Shadowing real speech rewires how fast you retrieve words. What if the gap between knowing English and sounding fluent has nothing to do with vocabulary size at all, and everything to do with speed? Many learners know more words than they think, but they retrieve them too slowly to keep up with a real conversation, so they default to the same 50 safe words on repeat. Shadowing, listening to a real unscripted conversation and speaking along with it in real time, matching rhythm, pauses, and intonation, directly attacks that speed problem. It forces your mouth and brain to produce vocabulary at native pace, not at your own comfortable, deliberate pace. This matters because conversation doesn't wait for you. There's no pause button when a real person is talking to you. Shadowing simulates that exact pressure safely, alone, before you ever need it live. It also does something sneaky. It teaches you which words natives actually reach for instinctively versus the textbook correct words that technically work but sound stiff and dated. You start absorbing phrases like, "I'm not gonna lie," or "that caught me off guard," not because you memorized them, but because your mouth has physically produced them dozens of times at real speed. That physical repetition builds muscle memory the same way an athlete drills a movement until it's automatic. Vocabulary without speed is trivia. Vocabulary with speed is fluency. Shadowing real, messy, unscripted conversations is the fastest bridge between the two. Small daily conversations beat occasional marathon study sessions. Here's a statistic that should shock every serious learner. A 5-minute real conversation, done daily,